The next thing that we're going to talk about are alternative titles. These are basically just what they sound like. They're alternatives to the title that appears in the 245 field in the title and statement of responsibility area. But they're titles that you think that would be useful to your patrons when they're searching for this item. One type of alternative title could be ones that appear on the item, but they're different from the title that's on the chief source of information. For example, here is the screenshot from the title frame of the movie Independence Day, and it says Independence Day on the title frame. However, the cover for the DVD case says ID 4. It doesn't say Independence Day anywhere on the cover. And so if you think that your patrons might search for this item by that title, you would want to go ahead and include that in your catalog record as an added entry that can be searched for when they do the title search. So here is how it would look. There's a simplified version of the title area. I didn't include the statement of responsibility or anything, but you have Independence Day with the GMD video recording. And then in a separate field, in a separate area, an added entry, you would have ID 4, which is the title that appears on the cover. Another case in which you might use an alternative title, or what's also called a varying form of the title, is it doesn't always have to be a title that appears somewhere on the item. It could be just another way of spelling the item title or something like that, something that you think that patrons might not necessarily know how it appears on the item, and so they might search for it differently, and you want to have that in your record so that they can find it. For example, here's the movie Wall-E, and it's kind of stylized on the title screen, but most people usually write it out with a hyphen between wall and E. And so that is what you would put in your 245 field for your your title and statement of responsibility area. However, some people might spell it without the hyphen. They would just put W-A-L-L-E. And so if you want to make it possible for your patrons to find items like that, you would want to go ahead and put W-A-L-L-E in your record as an alternative title. Some other cases in which you might see titles like this would be titles that have a number in it. If it has the number 1 and it appears as a numeral on the item, but you think that people might spell it out, O-N-E, then you would put an alternate title that has the number spelled out. Abbreviations are another case of this. If you have an item where the title has the word St. Louis in it and it's abbreviated, ST period, but you think that people might search for it spelling the word saint out, you could go ahead and create an alternate title that has the word saint spelled out. So things like that. They don't necessarily have to be on the item in question. They can also be just something that you think your patrons will search for. The alternate titles go in a 246 field in a MARC record. And I wanted to point out the indicators because there are some options for things you can do with the indicators for the 246 field. For the first indicator, it is used to show or to tell the computer whether or not there should be an added entry and whether or not there should be a note for this particular alternative title. And a note means that if you want there to be a note, then you want it to display in the catalog record. You want your patrons to be able to see it when they are searching your catalog. If you just kind of want it to be behind the scenes, then you don't necessarily have to have a note. You could choose 2 or 3 that has no note. An added entry, on the other hand, tells the computer whether or not to index this in a title search. So most of the time I think you will want an added entry, because why would you go through the work of adding this information to your record if you don't want people to be able to search for it? So most commonly I think you would see either 1 or 3 for the first indicator, meaning that you want both a note and an added entry if you use the indicator 1. I mean that you don't want a note. It's not important to have this in the catalog record, but you do want an added entry, and in that case you'll use a first indicator of 3. Now the second indicator in the 246 field is used to indicate the type of title. Where did this come from on the item? You can see there are things like caption title, running title. A lot of these refer more to books, so they're not as applicable to video recordings. Portion of a title, if there's a part of a title that you think people might search for, you can go ahead and use 0 for your second indicator. So basically they just tell if your system is capable of displaying this, it will tell your system to display what particular type of title this is. And if it doesn't really fall into any of those, you can always use 3 for other title, or leave the second indicator blank. So here is an example of mark fields for both the title of Independence Day and the added entry of ID4 for an alternative title. And so you see ID4 goes in a 246 field, like we talked about. It has a 3 because we don't want to note, but we do want an added entry, so that's what the first indicator of 3 means. And then I've also used 3 for other title for the second indicator because it doesn't really fall into any of the other categories. Like I said, they're mostly used for book type things like cover title and spine title and running title, and they don't apply as well to video recordings. Here is our WALL-E example. Again, it's the same thing. I had a 246 field for WALL-E without the hyphen, 3 for no note but yes added entry in the first indicator, and 3 for other title in the second indicator, because this one doesn't actually appear on the item at all. It's just an other title that we supply as the catalogers. As I mentioned, the second indicator, where they specify what type of title it is, it's really most useful in a system that has the ability to display something differently based on those indicators, and not every local system does. So you can always use a blank second indicator. If you want, for example, either to have nothing display, or if you want to be able to specify where this title comes from by typing in your own phrase that specifies where it comes from. So for this example, and this can also, even if your system does display those display constants for what type of title it is, with video recordings, they don't really match up too well. So you still might want to be able to go ahead and display your own phrase to describe where this came from. So in this case, you would use a subfield I for that. The main title still goes in subfield A, but before that you can use a subfield I and use a phrase to describe where it came from, like title from DVD case in this instance. So that's always an option. If you think it's important, and this you would most likely use in a case where your first indicator is 1, meaning that you do want a note to display. You do not want your patrons to know where this came from. You want them to be able to see this when they look at the catalog records. So you can still use a subfield I in order to create your own description of what type of title it is, and that will still work even if your local system doesn't really display the different options for the second indicators in your 246 field.